Hello friends, it's Lisa and welcome to a little 2022 survey, a little reflection of my reading year from last year. I have seen other creators do these kind of videos where you just answer some questions, reflecting on your goals and some of your stats and talking about some of the books you read last year and just kind of wrapping up the year in this way. I definitely have some books that I talked about a lot in my favorite books of the year video and my worst books of the year video, but I also thought this would be a good chance to talk about some other books that I maybe didn't mention in those videos. So I have taken questions from a couple of the end of the year survey videos that I've seen. I've taken some questions from the one Gabby from Gabby Reads does, as well as Kayla from Books and Lala. So I will have their videos where I got the questions linked below. Let's just get into the survey and chat about some of my reads from 2022. Also, really quickly before we get into the actual video, if you know what this shirt is referencing, I don't know how well you can see it. Here we go. This will work. If you know what this is from, we are now best friends. It's official. All right, so the first question for this survey is how many books did you read this year and did you meet your goal? So yes, I did meet my goal. My goal for this year was 65 books, which is a very reasonable goal. It's something that I knew I would be able to reach. I don't like my Goodreads goals to stress me out. I don't want to be down to the last day of the year being I gotta fit in 5 books to reach my goal. I just don't need to be stressed about anything else. I'm stressed enough. So I like to keep my reading goal pretty reasonable and something that I know I can achieve, but also still be higher than the previous year to kind of keep me a little bit more inspired and motivated. So my goal was 65. I met it, I think, back in August, and I did end up reading 103 books in 2022. It's the first year that I've ever read 100 books in a year, so I was really proud of that. I wanted to at least do that one year in my life, and now that I've done it, the pressure's off. I don't care how many books I read in 2023. But yeah, very proud of myself that I managed to read 103 books in 2022 and reach my goal. So the next question is your most read genre of the year, and I think according to Storygraph, well, Storygraph for some reason counts young adult as a genre. Don't we agree that that is more of an age category than a genre? So ignoring that, but according to Storygraph, my most read genre of the year was romance, which I can't say I'm surprised by that. I definitely entered my romance era in 2022, but then romance is followed by fantasy and contemporary. Apparently I read the same amount of fantasy and contemporary this year, and I honestly think the reason why my fantasy the reason I've read as many fantasy in 22 that I did was because of the Shadowhunters read along, because those get categorized as fantasy. I definitely did not read as much fantasy as I normally do in 2022, which is fine because I entered my romance era. I was having a great time with that, but I am hoping in 2023 I can read a bit more fantasy. I definitely want to get back into that genre and I just love it. So I definitely want to get back to reading a little bit more of it. The next question is the longest and the shortest books that you read this year. So the shortest book that I read is Princess Ever After by Kay O'Neill. This is a very cute, very quick read, middle grade graphic novel, and it's just really wholesome, really cute. It's sapphic, and I just really had a good time. I've really loved everything that I've read from Kay O'Neill. And then the longest book that I read this year was City of Heavenly Fire by Cassandra Clare, speaking of the Shadowhunters read-along. I think honestly a lot of the biggest and longest books that I read in 2022 were Shadowhunter books. So the next question is your favorite book published in 2022. And if you saw my favorite books of 2022 video, this is gonna come as no surprise because my favorite book of the year was published in 2022. And that is All My Rage by Saba Tahir. I just have to laugh every time this book appears in a video. I feel it's constant. Every other video I post, this makes an appearance. But yeah, I absolutely love this book. It was an emotional read. It just really impacted me. I loved the characters. I loved the writing. I just love Saba Tahir's books. Anything she writes, I will read and I will love, I'm sure. So definitely my favorite book of the year and definitely my favorite book published in 2022. So the next question is your favorite debut book in 2022, and I have 2 answers for this. I have an answer for a debut book that came out in 2022, and I also have a favorite book that was a debut that debuted in 2021. I honestly did not read a whole lot of 2022 debuts this year, which I would like to get better at doing in this coming year because there's a lot of great books that are coming out by debut authors and I want to make sure I'm prioritizing that. But my favorite debut, one of the few that I read this year that came out in 2022, was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is a memoir about Jeanette McCurdy's experience growing up in the entertainment industry and the abuse she faced in this industry, as well as the kind of toxic and abusive abusive relationship she had with her mother, as well as discussing her mental health, addiction, eating disorders, all of that. So trigger warnings for those topics. It definitely goes heavily into detail on those things. But yeah, this was Jennette McCurdy's debut. I don't know if Jennette McCurdy is planning on writing any more books, but if she does, I will happily read them. I loved this memoir, not because I loved reading about these things. It was very difficult to read, but I thought it was so well done and very emotional, and definitely like something that I think about quite often when reflecting on my reading year, and just like in general, I just think about this book and Jennette McCurdy and what she experienced all the time. And another book that I read that is a debut, just not from 2022, is Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. This debuted in 2021, but this is such a great YA fantasy. There's great world building, great like creatures that are included in this world, and amazing characters, lots of twists and turns. And I just wanted to mention something else because I really didn't read that many debuts from 2022. Hopefully next year, if I do this reading survey, I have better answers for this question. The next question is the best book that was not published this year that you read. It's one backlisted title that I read this year and loved. And again, if you saw my favorite books of 2022 video, might not be coming as a surprise because this was the number 2 spot, and that is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Yeah, this was another one of my favorites of the year. Honestly, between All My Rage and Beach Read, these were my favorite books of the year. I only just had to figure out ranking for them for that favorites video, but I loved this book. I love the romance. I love the kind of discussions within this book on grief and loss and how that's handled, and how Emily Henry like balances the lighter, romantic, fluffier moments with those discussions. I also just love January and Augustus and their relationship and the dates they go on, and I love this book so much, and it just makes me so happy. But also like I sobbed reading this book. I don't know. This book had everything that I could want in a romance, so really loved it. All right, the next question is a book that lived up to the hype, and I have multiple books to mention. Honestly, most of these questions, I don't just pick one book because I can never do that, but a book that definitely lived up to the hype for me. Beach Read. Hello. Emily Henry's romance books are definitely very hyped up. They're very, very popular. And this was the first Emily Henry like adult romance that I had read. And I was really nervous because a lot of people love them, but obviously it lived up to the hype for me. It's one of my favorite books of all time now. But there were some other books that I read throughout the year that were quite hyped that I agree with. And one of them is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. I have read the first book in the Brown Sisters trilogy, Get a Life, Chloe Brown. So I knew that I liked Talia Hibbert's writing. I knew that I enjoyed the characters, the romance and everything, but this particular book I knew a lot of people really loved. I feel like this and Eve Brown are either like people's favorites. I don't really see a lot of people with Chloe Brown as their favorites, so this was one that I was really excited to get into, and it definitely lived up to the hype for me. I loved the characters, I loved the romance. It has fake dating, which is one of my favorite tropes, so yeah, absolutely loved it. Another book that I enjoyed that was really hyped is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. I kind of started to pay more attention to the historical romance genre in 2022. It's something that I had like seen bits and pieces of throughout the years, but I never really paid that much attention to it. But I knew of Tessa Dare. She's a very popular author, and The Duchess Deal I feel like is maybe her most popular book. I could be mistaken, but it's definitely like one of her most popular books. And this was like one of the first historical romances that I read, and I just knew it was super hyped, and Tessa Dare was super beloved. So I had high expectations going into it, but I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favorite books of the year. Some other books that were very hyped that I ended up loving this year was Felix Ever After by Case and Callender, also From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata, and Nimona by Andy Steven is also a very popular graphic novel. I also hyped that graphic novel up for years. I had wanted to read that book for a very long time, and I finally read it this year and absolutely loved it. So definitely had a lot of books that were very hyped up that I was very excited for this year that ended up living up to that hype for me, which is always very exciting when a book is very hyped, whether you're hyping it up to yourself or other people are hyping it up and you end up enjoying it, because the next question is a book that did not live up to the hype, and this is when things get they get sad. And one book that didn't live up to the hype for me that I was so disappointed by was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I didn't dislike this book by any means, but it just wasn't my favorite, and I was so sad about it because this was a romance I had heard so many good things about for years, even before I was really paying much attention to the romance genre because I wasn't really reading it. I feel like it's just like one of those books that like if you read romance, you've read The Hating Game, and so many people love it, and I just did not, so I was really upset that this did not live up to the hype for me. Some other books that are pretty hyped that I did not end up enjoying were The Duke and I by Julia Quinn, another historical romance that, I mean, it's a part of the Bridgerton series. It has the show, and the show itself is very popular. The series is popular, so I was very excited to read this first book in the series, and I did not enjoy it. Also, From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, a very popular series, very popular author, and I did not like this book at all. And another one that I just found okay, I think I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't like the worst book that I've ever read, but it definitely is very hyped up and I was expecting to love it, was Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. So the next question is a book that felt like the biggest accomplishment. So like I was kind of saying earlier, I didn't read a whole lot of like big chunky fantasy books, which I feel like are typically the books that make me feel like the most accomplished. But there were a couple of other books that I was proud of that I read this year. One of them was Emma by Jane Austen, because this is a classic. I am not typically a classics reader. I want to read a lot, I just never pick them up. So I'm definitely not someone that reads a lot of classics, and I can find them kind of intimidating, but I'm really proud of myself for picking this up and finishing this, especially because this book took me a while to get through. I started this book in August and then I just kept putting it down and like ignoring the fact that I had started it, and then once I picked it up and got really into it, I enjoyed it. But it was one that I had on my currently reading shelf for a while, so I was very happy to finally take it off my currently reading shelf. It made me feel very accomplished when I finally finished it for that reason as well. And just like some books in general that I was proud of myself and my friends Casey and Darian for also reading this year was the Shadowhunter books. We've been working on our Shadowhunter read-along. It's continuing in 2023 because there's so many Shadowhunter books. But that's something that we started in January of 2022. We started with City of Bones and we've been making our way through all the series and short story collections, and we did all of the 12 books of the year. We're actually taking a bit of a pause in January and we're going to pick back up in February, but I'm really proud of us for sticking with that and continuing on with that the whole year. That's something that we could have very easily like gotten a few months in and then been like, okay, we need to stop. But I'm really proud of us for reading all of those books, and it does feel like a big accomplishment reading 12 of the first like 12 books in the Shadowhunter Chronicles. There's a lot of books in the Shadowhunter world, so I'm just proud that we were able to stick with that and read them, especially because I have attempted to go back and reread all of the Shadowhunter books from the beginning before, and it flopped. I got like 4 books in and then gave up, so I'm happy that we were able to like stick with it this year and actually continue on with that read along and read all of the books in the Shadowhunter world. The next question is favorite characters, and I'm mentioning multiple characters because again, I can't pick just one. But first I want to mention Felix, Ezra, and Leah from Felix Ever After. I loved that group. I loved their dynamic, and I loved all of them individually and as friends, and they were just some of my favorite characters to read about this year. I really loved them. I also really loved a lot of the characters from Nimona by N.D. Stevenson, specifically Nimona and Ballister Blackheart. I love them like individually as characters, but also the kind of bond that the two create throughout the book. This like almost father-daughter relationship that they create, and I just loved their characters. I loved their dynamic, and I loved a lot of the characters in that graphic novel as well. I also want to mention Ling and Henry from The Diviners. Henry is a character that shows up in the first book in the series, The Diviners. This is the second book in that series, but I feel like we see a lot more of him in this book, and I grew to really love him and care for him in this book. And Ling is a new character that gets introduced in Layer of Dreams, and I just loved her from the very start. Again, another one where their friendship was also really fun to read, and I loved reading their moments together. And then just in general, all of the characters from the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I loved Mika, the main character. I loved Jamie, the love interest. I loved the young girls that Mika was sent to train, because Mika is a witch and these 3 young girls are also witches and their magic is kind of out of control. So Mika gets sent to kind of help train them, and I loved them as well. I loved the other like side characters. Just like the found family aspect of this story was what made me love it so much and what made it so special. So the characters themselves were also favorites. And the next question is your least favorite characters of the year, and I think it's tough because there were definitely characters I did not like this year. I think maybe number 1 has to go to Daphne Bridgerton. Was not a fan of her. But also Poppy from Blood and Ash. I also didn't like Hawk from Blood and Ash either. Josh from The Hating Game was on thin ice throughout that whole book. But also a character from a book that I did really love, but I really did not like this character, was a character from Five Survive by Holly Jackson. And I don't want to say which character because the whole premise of this book is that our main character is stuck in this RV with her friends going on spring break, and then the RV like breaks down, and then they end up finding out that there's someone like outside of the RV that's trying to like take them out, and there might be someone inside of the RV that's working with the person on the outside. So I don't want to say specifically which character I don't like, because I don't know if that would get into spoilery territory, but there's a character that is just willing to throw everyone under the bus the entire book and is like deflecting the blame the whole time, and Just awful. Couldn't stand them. I loved the book though. I loved Five Survive. I thought it was so much fun and so great, but that character specifically, I kind of wanted to punch in the face the whole time. The next question is the most shocking or surprising moments that you read this year, and kind of speaking about Holly Jackson, Five Survive definitely had a lot of shocking and surprising moments. I feel like thrillers themselves just generally have shocking, surprising moments. So Five Survive by Holly Jackson definitely had a lot of twists and turns that I did not expect, and just moments that had me actually gasping, as well as her other books in her other series, the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I read the sequel, Good Girl, Bad Blood, as well as Good as Dead this year, and this one in particular had a lot of twists and turns and a lot of moments that I just did not anticipate. I did not anticipate where this book was going to go the whole time I was reading it. It was so stressful, and there were so many surprising moments as well. Another book I wanted to talk about is actually The Cruel Prince by Holly Jackson. I read this book this year. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. This was fun for some reason. I just did not have an interest in it for so long, and I just did not want to read it. I don't know why, because it seems like it would be something I'd be interested in, but I finally read it this year and enjoyed it. So I was just being a clown all these years. I was pushing it off. But this was one that I found surprising, because whenever I heard people talking about this book, all I knew was that it had to do with fairies, and everyone always talked about Jude and Cardan and their relationship. That was all I knew about it. I just knew everyone loved Jude and Cardan, which, like, fine, that's great. I also really liked their relationship, but I never heard anything about the actual plot of this book, which is funny because, like, the relationship between Jude and Cardan is not, like, as prevalent as you would maybe expect, considering that is the only thing I had ever heard about it, at least with the first book. I haven't read any of the other books in the series, though I want to, but, like, the plot and, like, the political aspect of this book is definitely, like, at the forefront, yet I knew nothing about that going into this book, so a lot of the twists and turns within the plot I was so surprised by, because I'd never been spoiled for it, because I'd never heard anything about it. But yeah, there were some moments in this book that I did not anticipate. There's, like, I don't want to say too much, but I feel like it's kind of the scene that sets off these characters on their journey throughout, like, the second half of the book that just completely took me by surprise. So definitely one that I was surprised and shocked by some of the moments and some of the twists and turns in the plot, because I never really knew much about the plot. I also wanted to mention a book that I didn't mention in my favorite books of the year video, but is definitely, like, a book that I loved this year, and that's Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. This had a lot of, like, sad and emotional moments throughout the book, but a lot of things that I just didn't anticipate happening. It was one of those books where it's like, this can't get any worse for these characters, right? And then it would, even though the whole book was kind of sad. I still was surprised when, like, even more sad things would happen. But yeah, I really loved this book. I didn't talk about it, like I said, in my favorite books of the year video, so I wanted to at least acknowledge it in this video. Definitely an emotional read with some shocking twists and things that happened that I didn't expect, even though the whole book was setting the tone for being very sad, but definitely one of my favorites of the year as well. I feel like I'm starting to lose my voice, so sorry about that. But the next question is your favorite couple or OTP, and I see OTP in the question and I haven't heard OTP in so long, so that kind of made me laugh. But anyway, your favorite couple of the year, and of course January and Gus, had to mention them. I'm obsessed with them. But some other couples that I loved aside from Beach Read, so I can talk about something else. I really loved Katza and Poe from Graceling. I actually really liked the relationship in Fire, the sequel, as well, but I really loved Katza and Poe as characters, like, individually, but together. I just loved their dynamic. It made me so happy to read. I also really love the kind of relationship that ends up developing in Felix Ever After. I don't want to say who it's between and what ends up happening, because there's kind of a love triangle, and I don't want to spoil, like, what ends up happening with that, but the relationship at the end of this book I just absolutely love. But actually there were a lot of couples that I was liking this year, just because I was reading so much romance. So again, like Florence and Benji from The Dead Romantics I really loved. I really loved Ivan and Jasmine from Luke Off with Love. I really loved Mika and Jamie from The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I not only loved the found family aspect of that book, but the romance as well. And I also really loved Gabriella and Jonathan from The Mistletoe Motive. There were just a lot of really great couples in the romance I was reading this year. Obviously I was really into romance, so a big part of that is liking the couples you're reading about. So definitely had a lot of couples that I loved this year. The next question is the best written book that you read this year. So again, I have a few options. Obviously I have to mention Emma by Jane Austen. It's Jane Austen, so of course. And again, mentioning All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. Part of why I loved this book so much is Sabaa Tahir's writing, how powerful and emotional it was. I just love Sabateur's writing style and how she always causes me pain. Also, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy is another one that I really liked the way that it was written. I loved that Jeanette McCurdy really wrote it as if she was writing, like, they were like diary entries almost from that time. It very much felt like she was writing as if in that moment still. So I really loved the way she wrote that. I also really loved the writing in Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee, another one where the story itself was really emotional and the writing really helped emphasize those emotions and the sadness and just made me feel so impacted by the story because of how it was written. But another book I wanted to mention for this is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is a book that's written in verse, which I really love. I have read a handful of books now that have been written in verse, and this is one of them, and I absolutely loved it. I feel like the way it's written really adds to the emotion of the story. Again, it really adds to the impact. I mean, I think this would be an emotional story regardless. It's about this boy whose brother is killed, and he gets on the elevator to go and get revenge on the person who killed his brother, but each stop on the elevator, someone from his past comes on and like talks to him and just chats about what he's about to do, and it makes him start to really reflect on his life and the choice he's about to make. And it's just a very emotional story, which would have been emotional no matter how it was written, but I think because of the way it was written in verse, that really added to the impact. And Jason Reynolds is just an incredible author, incredible writer. I can't wait to read more from him. The next question is the book you pushed the most people to read this year, and I feel like if you've been paying attention to this whole video, it's not really going to be a surprise. Yeah, All My Rage. I think because too, I read this book towards the beginning of 2022. I think I read it in March. So I had really the whole year almost to kind of shove this book into your face and make you all read it. I just love this book, and I've had people pick this up because I've talked about it so much, which is really cool. That's one of those really cool things about being a content creator and recommending books, is having people pick up books based off of what you've said and your recommendations. And whether people have enjoyed the book or not because I've pushed it so much is, you know, entirely different, and everyone has different opinions, but the fact that people have picked it up because I've talked about it is really cool. Another book that I think that happened with too as well is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I remember in that vlog where I read that book and talked about how much I loved it, there were multiple comments of people being like, I just placed a hold on this through my library because of you, or like people being excited to read it because I was talking about it so much. So no matter how many times it happens, it's just really cool that people actually like listen to what I'm saying. Sometimes I feel like I'm just talking into the void, but I'm not. I'm talking to you all and you listen, apparently, which is just really cool. The next question is kind of similar. It's a book you think you'll be recommending the most from the books you read in 2022. So yep, All My Rage, of course. But I think some books that will probably be like common themes on my channel and recommendations videos, I think I'll be recommending Felix Ever After a lot. This was such a great YA read, such an important read, and one that I feel like so happy that YA readers have available to them. Another one that kind of I feel the same way about is Long Way Down. Definitely one that I'm going to be recommending a lot. I also think I'll probably end up recommending The Mistletoe Motive by Chloe Leese a lot because it's not only short, it's like, I think it's under 200 pages and it's a holiday romance. So it's going to be something you're going to want to read towards the end of the year. You may be trying to find some shorter reads to reach your Goodreads goal. So it's going to be a good one to recommend for that time of year anyway. And like I was saying, it is a holiday romance. And I feel like personally, I have not read a lot of holiday themed books that I've enjoyed. This is like one of the few that I've liked. I don't even know. I think this might be the first holiday romance that I've really liked. So definitely one I'm going to be recommending for that reason as well. Plus it was just really good. The romance was really good. I loved the setting. They work at a bookstore. It's around the holiday season. He's grumpy and doesn't really like the holidays, and she loves the holidays. There's also Ace Rep in this book. She is demisexual. She's also autistic. So it's just really great. So great. Such a great read, and definitely one that I'm going to be, I think, recommending a lot in the winter, end of the year months. The next question is a favorite newly discovered author. So Emily Henry, definitely for sure. I read for the first time this year. I read a few of Emily Henry books in 2022, but Beach Read, obviously, as you've seen throughout this video, I love. So definitely going to be reading probably anything Emily Henry publishes at this point. Also Sangu Mandana, who wrote The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. As soon as finishing that book, I went to this author's Goodreads and looked at everything else that they've published, and I now want to read all of their backlist. I'm probably going to read everything they publish from here on out. Also Chloe Leese, like I was saying with The Mistletoe Motive, I really enjoyed it, and it was a novella, so I'm excited to read more of Chloe Leese's like full-length novels. Also Mariana Zapata and Jason Reynolds and Ayana Gray are definitely authors that I'm going to continue to read their new releases, and if they have any backlisted titles, I'm going to go back and read some of them. I'm just very excited to like dive deeper into their backlist and their new releases. Okay, the next next question is favorite book covers of the year. So of course I made this question more difficult for myself than it needed to be. I have some backlisted books, some books that came out before this year that I read this year with some beautiful covers, and then I have some 2022 releases, some that I've read, some that I haven't. So for the backlisted titles with covers that I love, I of course have to mention Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. I feel like I've mentioned this cover almost as much as I've mentioned this book on my channel. I just love it so much. I think I have to acknowledge it every time. I also wanted to talk about the new, like, updated Graceling Realm series covers. So the ones I read this year are Graceling and Fire, and I just love these covers. I think that they're absolutely beautiful. I love the colors. I love the illustration style. And then for some 2022 releases with some stunning covers, I want to talk about Heartstopper Volume 4. I just love the Heartstopper covers in general, but this one I love the, like, pinky purple vibes. I also really love the Dead Romantics cover, not because like the cover itself is fine, like I never disliked it before picking it up, but when reading the book you pick up on different things on the cover that have some significance to the plot, and it just made me love the cover even more. I also really loved Cursed, which this is the sequel to Gilded. I actually think I prefer this to the cover to Gilded. I love the castle. I love like the red with the teal. Obviously like the light is reflecting off of this very shiny dust jacket, so sorry about that, but I love the colors. I love that the like cloak that she's wearing like goes down the whole page. Like, it's just stunning. I'm obsessed. Also, some 2022 releases with beautiful covers I have yet to read, but very excited about. Ophelia After All. I love this cover. I love the colors on it. I love the illustration style. It's just so beautiful. Also, Blood Scion by Deborah Fillet. I need to look up how to say that last name, but I absolutely love this cover. It's one that I thought was really pretty when seeing pictures of it, but in person it's even more stunning. The design goes all the way onto the back of the book. It's just so beautiful. And finally, Bloodmarked by Tracy Dion. I think this series has some of the most beautiful book covers I have ever seen. I just love them. I love the characters on it. I love the like colors that are always on them. It's just, they're so stunning. The next question is favorite book adaptation from 2022. So of course, Heartstopper. Hello. I clearly love Heartstopper. I love the graphic novels. I love the show. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I feel like the show basically just like made the graphic novels come to life. They did such a good job of taking the tone of the books and the characters and just making them match so perfectly. It feels like you're watching the graphic novels. It's just so well done. I also watched Bridgerton this year. I watched season 1 for the first time this year, and season 2 came out this year, and I absolutely love the show. Didn't so much love the book, and I'm not going to continue on with the series, but specifically season 2 of Bridgerton, top tier. So good. Would die for Kate and Anthony. The next question is a book that made you cry the most this year, and hello if you're new here. Hi, I'm Lisa. I tend to cry over books very easily, but I am going to answer this with like books that made me like sob, because I cry easily, but like full-on sobbing, tears dripping down the face, that doesn't happen as often. I definitely feel like this year a lot of the books that made me full-on sob were books about grief and loss, and a book that I read at the beginning of 2022 back in January, and I didn't actually like love this book. I think I gave it 3 stars, like it was fine, but it made me sob, was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. This is a romance book where I didn't dislike the romance, but I didn't love it. But the whole premise is that the main character goes back to visit her dad after 10 years of not seeing him, and she goes to Alaska to stay with him. So it's a bit of a lifestyle change. She's reconnecting with her father, and her father is sick. I believe he has cancer. And y'all, this book had me sobbing. I think this might be the book that made me cry the most this year. Probably tied with The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I cried like the whole last 100 pages of this book, and then like for 20 minutes after finishing the book, I was still sobbing, and it took me that long to like collect myself and stop crying. But also, All My Rage and Beach Read also dealt with grief, loss, all of those things, and made me quite emotional, which I think is also why they're some of my favorite books of the year. I think I just love a good emotional read. I also cried quite a bit reading Cursed by Marissa Meyer. The ending of this book just really took me by surprise and hurt my feelings. And I also cried quite a bit doing a reread of Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. The Infernal Devices series just like hurts my feelings, makes me so emotional the whole time, but the ending of this series, just like, I feel like the whole second half of this book, I didn't stop crying. It hurts. And on the kind of opposite end of that question, the next question is a book that made you laugh the most. And I don't really remember books that make me laugh. I remember the ones that make me cry. I remember the ones that make me angry, but the ones that make me laugh, I feel like I struggled a bit. I believe I laughed quite a bit reading Beach Read. I think Emily Henry is just very funny. The humor in her books I really enjoy. I also laughed a lot reading People We Meet on Vacation. I also think that Talia Hibbert is a very funny author. I remember laughing quite a bit reading Take a Hint, Danny Brown. And also just like the Shadowhunter books, like, I mean, maybe not so much this book in particular, but the Shadowhunter books in general, I feel like have a lot of funny moments. There definitely were other books that I read this year that made me laugh. It's just like hard to remember that for me for some reason. The next question is your favorite reread that you did this year. And normally I feel like I reread a lot more books in a year, but other than the Shadowhunter read along and rereading the Shadowhunter books, I think I only reread 2 other books. I reread Gilded by Marissa Meyer and Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. So I feel like by default, but also I did love rereading these books. The Shadowhunter books. I think this has to be my answer. I've loved revisiting this world. I just love the Shadowhunter world so much, and these characters, it's just such a comfort for me. Even when there's certain moments in books I don't love, I still just love the world and the characters so much that I'm like, anyway, 5 stars. But yeah, it's been so fun to not only reread this series and revisit my favorite characters in this world that I find so much comfort in, but it's been so fun doing this read along and being able to discuss it with Darian and Casey and do the live shows and discuss it with anyone who is participating with us. It's just been such a fun like added bonus to reading books that I already love. And then the final question of this survey is the most surprising 5-star read. So I think this has to go to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This was a book that I honestly almost didn't read. I had it out through Libby, through my library, and my hold on it was running out. I think I only had it for another like few days when I picked it up. And it was kind of one of those things where I was like, if I get to it, cool. If not, and it returns to the library, like, it's fine. I'll just read it next year or something. And imagine if I didn't read it, because I loved this book. And I just wasn't anticipating liking it as much as I did. I expected it to be a fun, witchy, spooky rom-com, and that really be it. I think I've said this before, that I read The XX by Erin Sterling, like right before reading this book, and I was kind of expecting a similar thing. The XX I thought was fine. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. I was just kind of expecting something within a similar vein, and like I was gonna rate it similarly, but I loved it. Clearly. It just took me by surprise how much I loved the characters and the romance and the setting. And it's just one of those books where as soon as I started it, I just like instantly knew that I was going to love it. Something just clicked on like page 1. I don't know if that happens with anyone else, where you just start reading a book and you just know that it's going to be something you love. You don't even barely know what's going on yet. You don't know the characters yet, but you just know, just something clicks, and it stays that way throughout the whole book and you just end up loving it. That happened with that book. But those are all of the questions for this reading survey for 2022. I thought it was a fun way to kind of wrap up the year in a different way, answer some questions, talk about maybe some books that I haven't talked about in other end of the year videos. Again, I will have Gabby and Kayla's videos where I took the questions from linked below, so you can go and check them out. I also will have the questions that I answered in the description if you want to do this type of survey yourself. I'd love to know down below in the comments if you have any answers to these questions, a surprising 5-star read, if you reached your Goodreads goal, if there were any books that made you cry this year, just any of these questions. If you have answers to them, I'd love to know down below in the comments. Also, if you made it this far in this video, first of all, please let me know if you know what this shirt is from. That's the first thing that you need to let me know, but also leave what emoji should you leave? I'm gonna say leave a yellow heart emoji. I feel like a lot of books that I read this year had some sort of yellow in the cover. So leave a yellow heart emoji down below in the comments if you made it to the end. But that is going to be it for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.